It is yet another day to get better. Becoming Undone is a podcast for those who dare bravely, risk mightily, and grow relentlessly. Join me, Toby Brooks, as I invite a new guest each week to examine how high achievers can transform from falling apart to falling into place. You know, life can take us on some unexpected journeys, and there's little doubt that Omaha, Nebraska's Steve Safranek has had his share of twists and turns on his path forward. From his days dreaming of gridiron glory as a high schooler, to years spent working in retail management, to a quick detour in the snack food industry while, of all things, getting his fitness and wellness business off the ground, it's been a rewarding and meaningful climb. But along the way, he realized that he'd learned so much from coaches, teammates, colleagues, and coworkers that he finally decided it was time to also add author to his bio. Releasing his book, The Shit No One Wants to Hear, How to Accept and Embrace the Uncomfortable Truth in Our Lives in 2022, he also made a dramatic shift from his career path of nearly 20 years in retail and sales to fitness, wellness, and development as a yoga instructor and owner of a fitness studio. Hear Steve share how he ended up a Cornhusker, how he simultaneously became a health-conscious vegan while working for Frito Lay, and how the former linebacker traded his shoulder pads for a yoga mat in episode 13, Namaste, with Steve Safranek. This marks a milestone for the show. This is the first guest that I don't know personally. I came across Steve Safranek's work. I don't even remember. It was on social media somewhere, but I saw this book called The Stuff No One Wants to Hear. And so I ordered it right away. It seemed to fall right in line with the kind of development stuff that I like to consume. And Steve, full disclosure on my part, I'm on chapter 12. I'd hoped to have this thing read before our interview, but I didn't quite get it done. So welcome to the show, Steve Safranek.
Thank you, man. It's my honor. Grateful to be a part of this, and I'm glad I can help you along with your milestone here.
Awesome. So, Steve, you're joining us from Omaha, Nebraska, where you are currently a yoga teacher and a trainer at Lifetime Incorporated, formerly an executive at Target Corp, right?
Correct.
Awesome. So we'll dig into that. As we always do in this show, start at the beginning, wherever that was for you.
Sure. Beginning. Well, born and raised Omaha, Nebraska. Been here my whole life. The product of that middle class family, parents and one sibling and the school and the college and all that stuff. So I went to school at the University of Nebraska in Lincoln, where I was fortunate enough to be a student athlete. Played football there for 4.5 years. Won a conference championship with the team and went to the Rose Bowl. So wonderful experience. There met my now wife of 18 years, and together we have 2 kids. Chase will be 16 at the end of the month, and Sage will be 13 in a few months. So right after college, as you mentioned, I got hired at Target as an assistant director with them. And what a wonderful company. If anyone needs an entry-level job or management job, I cannot recommend Target enough. So phenomenal culture, phenomenal people. To this day, a large part of my business acumen and leadership skills is from Target. I owe Target an immense amount of gratitude for what they did for me. So, but as you know, in the book, I got to a point where I started to walk a different path, go down a different journey, and realized that although my success was good and my performance was great, my salary and my bonuses, along with many of us, reflected that. I realized that retail was done with me and I was done with retail. Too many nights and weekends and working till 10 p.m. on Christmas Eve and then going back in at 4 a.m. on the day after Christmas. Right. As great as Target was, there was still a caveat, and the reality of it was that it was retail. Mm-hmm. And it just got to a point to where, okay, I've done this. This is an amazing experience. I'm not upset. I don't regret any of this, but it was just time for a change. Time to evolve. So, left the company for a brief stint at Frito Lay as a district manager. Then throughout that process, I had already been working on my yoga journey, practicing yoga, and what a profound impact it's had on me and in terms of understanding people and cultivating empathy, the ability to listen, and just starting to see the world in a different perspective and your own, from self-awareness to personal development and accountability. Yeah. And that led me down a path of becoming a teacher, which then led me down a path of becoming a personal trainer. And for the first time in my professional life, stepping down, taking a role that was not in management and not in leadership, and becoming a personal trainer, my own business owner. And again, as I've talked about in the book that you read, something that was vital in my development, coming across Simon Sinek's work about start with why and find your why, putting that into practice and cultivating my own why. And now, for the first time in my career, or in my life rather, I am doing every single thing that I'm doing in terms of a job is something that I love to do, in terms of writing, becoming an author, helping people improve their lives through yoga and with personal training. And now, apparently the kid who had to cheat on his finals in high school to graduate high school and was a terrible student and hated reading apparently became an author. And that's why we're here.
Right. Well, that's a great segue. You couldn't have set me up better. I think Sinek's work, starting with why, coupled with maybe who you are. You don't just show up at the University of Nebraska, especially in the era you were there, and just become a football player. That was a storied program, the Tom Osborne era. I mean, that took some work. That took some purpose. You don't become a Division I athlete just by chance. So who was Steve back before you ended up at the University of Nebraska, and what did he want out of life?
That's what a wonderful question. My answer candidly and truthfully is I don't know yet. That's something that I am currently marinating on and pondering and trying to understand and figure that out. I would say where I'm currently at, to answer the question more in depth, is an average boy of, with respect, average parents trying to figure out my way. Mm-hmm. And from the kid who, in my opinion, was not developed and evolved for traditional Orthodox school and didn't have that way of thinking, and having to really fight and claw just to, quote unquote, survive that paradigm, I knew that there was only one path forward in terms of after high school, and that was through athletics. Mm-hmm. And luckily enough, I had a decent amount of skill in the right state at the right time with the right program in Nebraska, as they were then, no longer now, that had this amazing walk-on program that allowed me the opportunity to even have that chance.
Steve's not wrong. Former Nebraska head coach, College Football Hall of Fame member, and eventual U.S. Representative Tom Osborne and his staff were famous for getting more out of far less talented rosters than other programs. In fact, some have tried to suggest that in college football, only those teams with a positive blue chip ratio have a legitimate shot to win a title, meaning the roster has to have more players who were 4- and 5-star athletes coming out of high school than they do 2- and 3-star. If that's true, that effectively limits the contenders to about 10 programs in a given year. However, the 95 Nebraska team that won a national championship, and considered by some to be the best college football team of all time, was estimated to average somewhere around 2.5 to 3 stars, with several key players being in-state walk-ons. How's that possible, you might ask? To me, it's simple. Boyd Epley and those who followed in his footsteps. The father of modern strength and conditioning. The Husker strength and conditioning program was decades ahead of the competition, allowing coaches at Nebraska to identify skilled but physically underdeveloped players, bring them in, train them in strength and speed, and then unleash them on the Big 8 conference to great success. By the time Steve arrived in 2000, that program was in full swing.
When I got there, I realized immediately that I was the perfect example of a dime a dozen. And that coming from a high school to where I was one of the strongest in my class and on my team, to now I have receivers and defensive backs who are bigger, stronger, and faster than me as a linebacker. And I realized, I don't know how this will work. And then realizing that my asset was to be much more about leadership and player coach, and my strengths were about intelligence and awareness and understanding my weaknesses.
Having experienced that as an athletic trainer and being a strength coach in the collegiate level, lots of student athletes begin as walk-ons, but not many finish. So that shows resilience, but to make it through that process. And then at some point you took your pads off for the last time. What was that transition like for you? Was sport core to your identity? Was that a painful process for you, or were you looking forward to the next chapter in your life?
It was absolutely, as it was with many people, part of my identity. I would tell you that right around my third year of my redshirt sophomore year, 2001, is when I realized that I'm not going to have, even to think back on it now, how naive I was, as not to say that there aren't walk-ons that make it to the NFL, because Nebraska is the perfect example of that there were. But understanding that, there's no way that I am going to be an athlete for a career. Like I have guys who are younger than me that are far, far better. And I've been here for 3 years, and they're like, you just see the writing on the wall, right? At some point you're like, you have to accept what is. And no matter how hard I worked, and no matter how clean I ate, and how much I was in the weight room, and how much I tried, and how much I sacrificed, I was at my max. I was at my ceiling. And then there are guys who ate McDonald's and Snickers and hated working out that would just put me to shame in every single respect, because they just had the talent, the skill, and the speed, and the bodies. So it was not a hard transition for me when it ended, because that part of me had already been gone through and accepted. So when it came time to hang the pads up, I was ready to go. And fortunately, because the University of Nebraska is an amazing institution, and I believe these guys are still there, Kim Shellpepper and Dennis LeBlanc and Keith Sammer, I owe a huge amount of gratitude towards, because their job is to prepare us athletes, male and female both, for the real world. And they have a career fair specifically for athletes before the general population. And they forced us to go. It's like, no, you don't get a choice. You're going. And that's where Target found me. And I say that literally, found me, and said, you're going to come work for us. And I said, okay. And then there you go. So luckily, that transition that you're inquiring about was already in place and had already been laid out for me, literally as a gift. And then I just had to open my eyes, pay attention, and capitalize on it, which I did. Yeah. So awesome. I was very lucky and fortunate to not be in the position to where college is done, athletics are done, and now I'm at home and I have no clue what I'm doing. And that goes to the academic counselors for athletics at the University of Nebraska, those three people that I named. Like, they're the reason why we're talking, is because they knew their job, and they said, no, you're going. It's not an option. And here we are.
Right. So your story is different from many of my previous guests who really struggled with that transition. But then you find yourself in this corporate space. And throughout the book, you talk about lessons learned and relationships that were built that maybe you didn't at the time handle things appropriately, but there was a lesson learned in that experience. But eventually that too comes to an end. And you kind of alluded to some of the negatives, but that's a scary thing to be 18 years into a career path and then just jump out. I mean, that's a terrifying transition for people. So what was the final straw that led you to believe that I've got to make a change, that this is not my purpose?
A lot of things are always going to go back to yoga. Okay. And to the people that don't practice yoga or know yoga, I mean, it's kind of like, yeah, I've heard of yoga and that's it. There's no understanding other than that. And then there's some people that it is, yoga, you're in a cult, right? And then those are like the two extremes if you're not practicing, right? and I teach now, and I co-lead our teacher training program. So I'm into the weeds, so to speak. And, again, my journey with yoga is very, very short and inexperienced compared to others. But yoga can be whatever you want it to be. It can be a practice, it can be a workout, or it can be an awakening, so to speak, a spiritual journey. And I had already started that through my own practice, even before becoming a teacher. But through that journey, things like self-awareness happen. And then you get to self-awareness, then growth happens. So then from growth, change happens, and then you start to evolve. And it's not just evolving physically, it's evolving cognitively. It's how you look at the world, how you perceive things differently, how you judge people or not to judge, and have empathy and understanding there's a why behind everybody. So that was well in place and well in play and already happening unbeknownst to me. And then when I started, like any career, at some point, you have ups and downs, right? And people leave and friends leave. And again, the universe works in ways. So we were in this midst of about a 5-year crazy intense transition with Target. So our CEO had to step down or retired. And then we had a new CEO come in, Brian Cornell, and every change that he made not only worked, but was a home run. And I believe a couple of years ago, he was voted as like America's top CEO out of all the Fortune 500 companies. He was amazing. Now, the reason that's important is because for the longest time, Target was all about work-life balance, and it was fast, fun, and friendly, and it was the team. And as naive as this sounds, I believe this, and this thought is not exclusive to me. Say for those first 11, 12 years as a retail manager, I never once thought I worked in retail, even though you work nights and every weekend, because it was Target, because it was different. And it was. There was not these horror stories where you worked, at least in my experience and with the people that I was close to. There was not these experience of working 6 days a week and 60 to 75 hours a week and becoming zombie. It was not that. It was about family. You understood that like work-life balance matters and money matters and pay and benefits matter. But as those changes started to happen culturally at Target, and again, their stock price is about 4 times higher than what it was when I was there. So all of the things are working. And then COVID hit, right? So the great people and companies adapted, and those that weren't great failed, right? Target just went through the roof.
Yeah, they did. Do y'all remember how hard it was to find toilet paper? I think I found a 4-pack stashed away behind the shelf at Target in April of 2020 once, and I felt like I'd found one of Wonka's golden tickets. Now, if you excuse me, my PTSD has bubbled up again. I got to go.
And I left before COVID in 2019, but all of that had already been manifesting. So then when these changes were starting to happen, I started to realize that I'm just not content with what I'm doing. I'm not receiving any value out of it. And yes, I'm managing people and I'm helping, but at the end of the day, the old joke with Target is we manipulate women into buy things they don't need, right? And my retirement count is obscene because of it, as are all of ours. So I just got to a point where the money did not matter. And it was about just being content and also getting out of that every other weekend and the nights in the weekend and having to work Christmas Eve and Thanksgiving Day, then the day after, then the whole weekend. It was much more about finding work-life balance, and the money was relevant. And when I left Target, I took a $30,000 pay cut. And it's not because Frito Lay did not pay well. And I left the best benefits that I've ever seen. And I lost a discount with Target and lots of culture and lots of leadership traits. Yeah. But it was an experience. So it was absolutely terrifying from taking just monetarily, but also the first time I had made a career change and not knowing what lay ahead with Frito Lay and not knowing what lay ahead with yoga and things like that. So to say I was scared couldn't be overstated, but I still knew in my heart that it was the right thing to do. It was time. Sure. It was time.
Yeah. I think that's a great consideration when we're considering major life changes like that. There's tension, and I've heard it really aptly explained that tension can involve either a push from or a pull toward. And would you say that your leaving that space was more you felt pushed out of that retail space, or you felt pulled towards something else?
Oh, absolutely. It was pulled towards doing something that I love to do. And it was not selling chips at an ultra processed food company, which you're going to read more of in your chapter, to change the world. But it was a necessary step to continue on the path. And, we talk a lot about this with yoga, and it's when you get into the stoicism and the philosophy, life is not linear. These changes are not linear. I would not have known that personal training and yoga teacher were a way to execute my personal why as a career and to be compensated for it. If not first leaving Target and then going to Frito Lay and then taking a management position at Lifetime before I became a personal trainer. Mm-hmm. So that part is in the book because I hadn't left yet. So it was absolutely a pull toward, but not linear. It's the whole 4 steps back to take, or a step back to take the 4 steps forward, or it's like going down into the valley before you get back up to the mountain. Right. So without question, a pull towards and I knew it then too.
Yeah. I think when we make those transitions, we're definitive with that option to press ahead with what we feel pulled toward. It's rare that that's just a straight linear climb. And I think you're spot on with that. But when you find yourself in the valley, you've made that decision. Okay, I'm jumping out of this line and I'm doing this other thing. It's just like working out, right? Like set a New Year's resolution. Well, I've lifted for 3 weeks, but I don't see any changes yet. That's when people quit. They don't see the results. When you're in that valley, what did you tell yourself to keep going? Were you tempted to pick the phone back up and try to jump back in? Or was you were going to press ahead?
Yeah. I mean, there is always, I think it's human nature to kind of to second guess yourself, right? Especially once, and I don't regret my time, the 2 years at Frito Lay, because it's part of my journey, part of my path and experience, and you learn from everything, right? I mean, if you don't, I feel you're missing the point. But it was very apparent early on that I was not a fit at Frito Lay, just because, here I am, this yoga teacher preaching this holistic lifestyle, currently at that moment a vegan, and I work for the ultra processed chip company, right? And I don't want to spoil it for you because you're going to read all about it in your last chapter, but there wasn't a regret in leaving. It'd been easy to go like, man, I lost $30,000 in salary, right? And then I was traveling at the same time, but just knowing, because of that journey that I knew I was on, so to speak. I mean, looking back on it now, I didn't know what I know then, but I knew that I wasn't comfortable where I was at with Target anymore. And I knew I wasn't being fulfilled. I certainly didn't get that at Frito Lay, but at that point I was already teaching yoga, and then I was starting to train yoga teachers. So it was just the necessary step, but I never regretted it. I never felt reluctant to pick up that call, but I would say after a year at Frito, I was like, okay, I'm not going to be able to stay here. There's nowhere to go. And then, it was easy to go, well, maybe it's this position. Maybe you look at something else. And then every single position that I looked at that would have been a promotion just seemed like a terrible role. And you see the people that had the roles and what they were doing and the amount of work they were putting in for chips.
Right.
I was like, clearly this is not. So even in that moment, it wasn't a regret of, oh my God, I made a bad decision. I should have stayed at Target. Oh God, no. The first time in my adult life since I was in high school as a 17-year-old. So at this point, 19 or 20 years of my adult life, the first Thanksgiving I had, where I did not have to work until 2 a.m. on the Wednesday before, then work Thanksgiving, then work the Friday and the weekend. In that situation, was worth it.
So while the step away from Target was certainly a welcome change, the interim job at Frito Lay was only a temporary measure. Instead, Steve had his sights set on doing something new that better aligned with this newfound purpose and his intentions to make a positive impact on the world.
So it was just a matter of, now what? Now where am I going and what am I doing? And again, I was already at Lifetime as teaching yoga, and the management role just fell into my lap quite literally. And then after about a 9-month stint, I realized I could literally stay here and make more money and do exactly what I love to do with personal training. So there's risk, right? But I knew because I was doing it for the right reasons that it was going to work out. And it has.
Right. Yeah. A quote comes to my mind: if it doesn't align with your purpose, it's a distraction. And as I read your bio, even before reaching out to you, I noticed that you had made a transition, kind of an intermediate step, and then now you're doing this full time. Do you feel like that kind of detour on your path still helped you work toward your purpose? I mean, were you in the hustle at that point? You're still building your yoga practice and
oh yeah,
growing as a coach, and that was just kind of a means to an end to help propel you to where you're at today?
Without question. I do not for a second regret my 2 years at Frito, because it was an experience, because that process made me understand that although I was not being fulfilled in doing what I wanted to do at Target anymore, in many ways, I took a step backwards. Again, like I said, holistic lifestyle, preaching this health and longevity. I'm a vegan and I'm working at the ultra process. I mean, literally perpetuating the COVID epidemic, literally, and profiting wildly off of it, individually and as a company. So I needed that experience as well to further not only validate what I was looking for and what I wanted to do, but also to understand that, yes, I got out of retail and yes, I've got this Monday through Friday gig, but now it's truly understanding that what I was looking for in terms of fulfillment, contentment wasn't just about me. It was about contributing positively.
Right.
And at least at Target, I was not perpetuating what I thought what we were doing at Frito Lay and other companies too. It's not a Frito problem, but it was when COVID hit, everything changed. Here we are, this ultra processed food company, and we have this ravaging disease that's killing our immune system. And we're not really sure at this point what's going on, how impactful it's going to be or is. And everyone talks about during COVID, when it hit, no water, no toilet paper. But no one talks about the other 2 aisles that were always empty. Every store, every day, were alcohol and chips.
Yeah.
And to this day, the people that I talk to at Frito Lay, I've been gone for a year, they are still not recovered in terms of their logistics and manufacturing process. They make their own stuff. They're still 50% capacity. And it's almost 3 years in. And that's because of the demand for the product.
Yeah.
And it's not food. So that was vital for me to understand going, I may not find something that I get to do full-time as a career and make money off of it. Because at the end of the day, like, work is work, but I just can't be part of the problem. And that's why it was easy for me to leave. Now, the irony with that is that because of that, I was already at Lifetime. The management role fell in my place. Then the personal training role fell in my place. And now that's exactly what I'm doing. Personal training and yoga. I am working on the weekends where I am here every day, where we're doing teacher training. Like this weekend, I'll be here 7 days. And I will work roughly 65 to 70 hours. I have not worked a second since I've been in this role. People are like, oh my God, you're here all the time. You're working so much. You work 6 days a week. That's not work. Because I finally found something that aligned with my purpose, to your point, to the quote. And that experience at Frito Lay, I know I needed to go through that to now have the understanding that I did. Because if I would have gone right from Target to Lifetime, I would have spent another couple of years being ready.
Right.
And the reason those roles fell in my lap is because I was ready because of the experience. And I hit with clients as a personal trainer, it's up to me to find my own clients, as it is for all of us. I had people asking me before I did it to train them, and I wasn't in a position to do so. And that's what led me down the path. So no regrets, but yes, I was absolutely pulled towards it for that. And to your said purpose, when your purpose and passion align, it's like the money will be there.
I think these big transitions, there's always this fear in the back of your mind. Is this a pivot toward what I'm supposed to do, or is this a shiny object that's distracting me? What was your thought process in, obviously you embraced yoga, you were eating clean, had gone to a strict vegan lifestyle. That's one thing, but making that your career, making that your life's purpose, that's a whole nother level of commitment. What was your thought process in terms of shiny object versus a true pivot?
Sure. Well, I could say the true pivot was in hindsight, the true pivot was going from Target to Frito Lay. It was that means to an end, but again, needed. And then another pivot was taking the management role here at Lifetime, a means to an end. But in hindsight, that was just a stepping stone, even though it was a step down in what I wanted to do. So I would say the shiny object for Frito was absolutely there, because the shiny object was getting out of nights and weekends and holidays and dealing with madness and chaos. And then the shiny object was going to management at Lifetime, because it was like, I can't do this anymore. Right. But then it was going through those steps that were necessary to then be set up for the reason I left personal training. And you want to talk about a risk. It's although I took a huge $30,000 pay cut, and it was the same when I went from Frito to Lifetime. But then I'm going to a job that is 100% commission based.
Right.
So not only are you taking a pay cut, now it's like you're going to start off with no money. And luckily, I planned it accordingly to where I had the right conversations with the right people. There was no object. There was no shiny, because they didn't exist, because I was not going to get any money. Mm-hmm. But I knew that I was making that decision because I'm going to do exactly what I want to do. I want to help people.
Right.
And I don't have to have in yoga being impacted, because I'm going to be able to teach more yoga. So that's not a thing. I'm going to make more money potentially, which I already am. And that's not because I'm great in anything at what I do. It's just because of the system, how it's set up. What a amazing feeling that I don't have to worry about a phone call at 3:00 in the morning because this truck is late, or right, because this person called in and I don't know if we're going to be able to open the store. I can just be there, show up, my client shows up, and we do the work. So yeah, it's been an amazing ride, and scary, but knowing that you're doing it for the right reasons has been good.
Right. Let's talk a little bit about the book. Talk me through the process of going from someone who didn't particularly like school to being a published author.
So in terms of the book, I had, part of this is the same journey, right? It starts from yoga, and for a long time, through yoga, one of the many things that had changed was a lot of reading. And from Simon Sinek to Jordan Peterson to Mel Robbins and Brene Brown, some authors that have had an impact. I started to, like I said, see things differently and just have a different perspective. And I started questioning why someone like me, who is no one of note or a fame or accomplishments, at least in the public sphere, is thinking about things differently, and I'm not hearing anyone else talk about it.
The Zoom connection is brutal. I'm so sorry, y'all. My internet connection was not cooperating on the day of this interview.
When I started to wonder why no one else is saying these things, I just started to assess, is there something here? And again, all the chapters of the book are along those lines. Even some of the great speakers or public figures on the podcast world, like the Joe Rogans and the Jordan Petersons, even they would fall into that trap of, social media is always the example I use. I mean, social media is how you found me, correct? Is that what you said?
Correct. Absolutely.
So social media is one of those situations to where every single person, when you talk about it, will always end at the same spot. It's toxic. It's toxic. It's a dumpster fire. Like, don't read the comments and avoid it, and like, get off of it. It's killing our kids. And even the people that are the most contrarian, the most controversial, fall into that trap. Joe Rogan is famous for saying, don't read the comments and don't engage. And Twitter is a dumpster fire. And that's just one example of all the things in the book, but it's social media is a tool, and you can choose to only troll Antifa or MAGA, or look at boobs and butts or abs, or you use it as a tool to learn and to share wisdom and to pass along and become better.
This thought was transformative for me. I've decided to leave social media more than once, and I've done it. I've done the insufferable, I'm leaving this place posts For the love of all things holy, don't make such cries for attention public like I did. I've just gone cold. I've deleted apps on my phone only to reinstall them days or weeks later. I felt like I was being held hostage by these things. But Steve's right. They're just tools. A chainsaw can be used to clear a road after a storm. It can also be used to chop your leg off. The trick is to be disciplined in how you wield it. There's that one word of mine for 2023, discipline. If I can manage to put Facebook and Twitter and LinkedIn and Instagram back in my arsenal without falling victim to the cheap dopamine that they promise, I might have a shot, and I might be able to stay connected to the people I care about. My goal this year is to publish at least 150 episodes. That's 3 a week. And without social media, how would anyone know that they were there for you?
And that was one of the themes of the book, along with everything else about we need to be more selfish so we can take care of others.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of the reason why I wasn't hearing this from anyone else is it's the shit you don't want to hear, right? That's obviously the title of the book. So I fought all of these feelings for a while just because I'm like, I'm just a regular dude. Like, why I wasn't even reading books 7 years ago and I'm going to write a book. Like the audacity of that thought was so, to me, arrogant. And like, are you like, I barely graduated high school and I'm going to write a book. And then you get to the whole, well, who are you? Why would someone read this? Right. But after kind of fighting that for about a year, and, I've been journaling every day for 7-8 years, and that's been a huge part of this. I don't remember how it started, but my daughter and I, and that's who I dedicated the book to, Lonnie Girl, it's kind of our nickname. We were talking and she goes, Dad, you should write a book. And that's all it took. And I said, okay. And then I started putting an outline together. And then I was like, okay, I guess I'm going to do this. And, the one thing that I'm proud of outside of obviously having the ability to write a book and get it published was the only people that knew about that from the entire impetus to the idea to publish was my wife and my children. And then obviously once I got to the point of, okay, it's written now, what do I do? My editor and a friend who wrote a book here locally in Omaha, and then understanding the publishing process and a cover. But when I released it, no one knew. So it was comforting that I was able to kind of keep that under lock and key for a while. So I didn't have to answer questions or give some unrealistic set of expectations. So again, back to yoga, and I just started thinking of things differently and wondering why I'm not hearing things about pain and discomfort are needed for success in life. Social media is not the problem. You are. And change is inevitable. And like those who don't understand it might as well just go away. And the feedback that I've gotten from the people that have read it are aligned with that. And I'm very surprised thus far because I expected this. Doesn't mean this isn't true, but I've not had a single person reach out to me, whether it's someone that I know or an email or a social media post or a text that said, I disagree with this.
Yeah.
So in a way that's good because it means like the message is resonating with the select few that have read it. Yeah. But then it's also are only the people that want to read it or don't need to read it reading it. Right.
Right.
And that's, I do think there's something there, like the people that don't want to read it because deep down they know won't read it.
Yeah.
So either way, it was a great experience. I loved every second. I mean, to this day, I made my intention when I decided to write it was that I'm going to just write the book for me.
Yeah.
And there's no expectations on sales. I'm under no illusion this is going to hit the New York Times bestseller list. It's a self-published book, right? But obviously individuals like you with the platform are helping with that. So I'm grateful. But I wrote it for the experience. And what an experience it is. To write a book is hard. But editing a book, oh my God, what a humbling experience.
Right.
I mean, every time I got notes back, it was as if my editor was saying, "You're stupid."
That was the stuff you didn't want to hear.
Oh God. but it was great. I learned a lot about that practice. I mean, I know basic grammar, and then now I understand like what writing a book and publishing grammar is. Like, oh, I didn't know that was a thing. Like, and then sentence structure. And so it was an experience, and I'm grateful for it.
There's two things I thought of as you're talking. One is the quote, "Move in silence." Lots of times people go on social media and they're like, "Hey, just finished day 1 of 75 hard," and then nothing else.
And that is exactly why that quote from Stephen Kotler in his latest book, The Art of the Impossible, when he said that was the last book that I read, and I made the decision, okay, when I'm done with this book, I'm going to start mine. And that's that line is in there. And when I read that, and I'm not going to tell anyone about it.
Yeah.
And it was just fitting that I had read that, and it was the last book before I started.
Yeah. I won't spoil the surprise, or I'll actually tell on myself, but I was working on a big project, and one of the things on the to-do list, the checkbox for the day, is don't tell anybody. And it was part of my plan was I want to do this, but I don't want to be so insufferable that everyone around me has to hear about all of the annoying things that I'm doing to make myself better. I don't want to be that guy. And so I love the idea of moving in silence, celebrate the outcome, but the process toward that outcome is just for me.
Totally. And I'm grateful that I didn't have to fib on that. There wasn't like, okay, I'll tell you. And that was the fun part. Those key individuals, the 10 or 12 or so that I gave a copy to, first many people that I acknowledged before then I, went on social media and said that I wrote a book. So that was a cool thing to see the look on their faces. Like, what do you mean you wrote a book? What are you talking about? Like, why would you not say anything? How do you not know this? So,
yeah. Awesome. Well, that's the second thing that it brings to mind is between hustling, moving in silence. The second part of that is once you've published this, now you've got a platform. And do you see this being a launch pad toward other things like a speaking career, or was this just something that you felt motivated to do? That was the intent.
In that moment, the intent was, as I stated, about the experience to write it, and we'll see what happens. I will say that throughout writing that book, I came up with many other ideas along the same lines of, I don't know if contrarian view would be appropriate, but just ways of thinking differently and something, that I won't share, because I do think that now I probably will write again. And now it's just like, let this thing breathe and experience it. So I think I would be incorrect if I said I didn't write another book. So it's still tough for me to say that I guess I have a strength that I'm a writer. Right. And I mean, obviously there's good writers and bad writers, but at the end of the day, it's like, are there bad writers if you wrote it? I think a bad writer would be someone who didn't write anything yet. Right. So it was a great experience. I do think I'll write again. And in terms of speaking, that's tough for me to get behind, but it's interesting that you bring it up, because I've had a couple of people here that have asked me about that. Yeah. And again, it goes into that self-confidence and that self-worth and self-validation and belief of, well, why would I write a book? Who the hell am I? And then I did it, and now I'm talking to you. So maybe speaking in that regard, whatever, sometimes we hear public speaking and things that like, I think I'm going to be on a TED Talk. Like, no, public speaking just means standing up in public and talking in front of 5 people. Yeah. So I don't foresee that is out of the realm of possibility either. Again, purpose and mission are aligned, right? You're not doing this for the money. You're not doing this for the status or the accolades. Everything tends to work itself out.
What would you tell Steve at 10 years old growing up in Omaha, Nebraska?
A lot. Man, I've been doing a lot of inner work with some stuff we chatted about offline. And I think I would start with that you are enough.
Yeah.
That it is okay to believe in yourself, that it is okay to accept yourself. And that's something that someone that I read and follow her every move, because I think she is hugely inspirational, is Dr. Shafali, author, clinical psychologist, and just a radical way of thinking. She had says, you cannot accept others until you accept yourself. And you cannot be compassionate towards others until you are compassionate to yourself. You cannot love someone else until you love yourself. And I've discovered over this journey in my life thus far that something that I have struggled with from as long as I'm aware, is the ability to believe in myself and to love myself.
Yeah.
And therefore has affected then relationships and behaviors going forward and even now. So I would say, if I could sum it up, it would be, you are enough, you are okay, you can believe in yourself, and to accept your worth, that all the praise and all the recognition that you will receive, you are worthy of, and that you do not have to dismiss it.
This is sage wisdom from a guy who's done a lot of work discovering who he really is. For me, that acceptance and that grace that is frequently so easy to just serve out in heaping portions to others, it gets served as crumbs to ourselves, by ourselves. Simply accepting that we are enough. Just 3 words, I am enough. So easy to say, yet so very hard to believe, and so necessary on a road to healing. Steve, are you glad you took the ride? This was a circuitous route to get to where you are today. I mean, you may have colleagues who discovered their purpose in yoga early, or they knew that they were destined to be a small business owner working with clients, and they went straight through. You didn't do that. Are you glad you took the journey?
Yeah, without question. And I'm still on it. And I hope that I never arrive. I hope that I never figure it out. I hope I never feel that, oh yeah, now I know. And that's taken a long time to get to there. So I am glad there is not a single regret. And it's not one of those like, what do you mean you don't make mistakes? No. I don't regret the mistakes that I made. I don't regret the decisions that I made, or even the wrong ones, even the ones where it's like, oh my God, what the F? Are you kidding me? Why would I? Because it's all part of the path. It's all part of the journey. Because I know now that I was ready to be a yoga teacher and personal trainer only because of the experiences that I've had. It's very similar to, the analogies that's used all the time in public spaces of, the person the immigrant that came over, middle-class family, blue collar, started from nothing, poor, and became this billionaire startup company. And then they had the kids, and the kids inherited it, and it burned to the ground because the kids didn't have to go through that adversity. So, my life is not one of growing in poverty or, terrible parents, or like I suffered physical abuse or PTSD from war. There's other things there that I'm discovering, but I didn't have adversity in that respect, but I had adversity like everyone else because I was a human. And my parents made mistakes, and I experienced certain things, not to accuse them of anything because I'm not. But there's an element of, I'm grateful that I can honestly and authentically say that I don't regret anything, because that's what has led me here. So am I glad to take it? Oh my God, yeah. But there's no pot of gold at the end of the rainbow. You're just going to keep searching and realize that when you stop searching externally and you go inward where the work is at, that's when you find contentment and fulfillment. There's an old Zen Buddhist saying that if you are traveling and you come across the Buddha on the side of the road, to kill it. And what that means is that if you find the answers in someone else or something else, that it's an illusion, because the answers in the work within you. So it's not to get caught in that trap. So absolutely, I love every second of it.
Yeah. Well, that leads us to our last question. And you answered this a little bit already, but what for Steve Safranek remains undone?
I would say from a professional standpoint, to continue what I'm currently doing and to let it organically unfold and to see what is unknown. I don't know what that is, but only to continue what I'm doing. From a personal standpoint, lots of stuff to discuss with family about certain things and going backwards in history and addressing certain things and acknowledging certain things and dealing with that stuff, and then continuing to have the best relationship that I can with my wife and children.
Mm-hmm. Well, I promised you 2.5 questions. That half question is, how can listeners connect with you if they want to check out the book or otherwise follow you on socials?
So on Facebook and Instagram and LinkedIn and TikTok and Spotify, just my name, Steve Safranek, nothing special. Then the book is just Amazon.com. It's self-published. So the shit no one wants to hear, you just have to spell !T or you may not find it. And it's available in paperback, hard copy, and Kindle. And I answer as many emails and direct messages as I can because I believe in helping. So I would be not following my mission if I wasn't responding to messages.
Well, Steve, it's been a real pleasure. I can't recommend the book enough. As I said, I had hoped to have it done prior to this, but I didn't quite get through the last couple of chapters. But I've only had it just less than a week, so I've powered right through it, and it's a great read. Some conviction for sure, but true growth occurs from that examined life, right? So I appreciate the spotlight to shine on myself, to realize that I might not want to hear this, but it's what I need in order to grow. Coming Undone is a Nitro Hype Creative production, written and produced by me, Toby Brooks. If you or someone you know has a story of resilience and victory to share for becoming undone, please contact me at undonepodcast.com. You can follow the show on Facebook, Instagram, and LinkedIn at Becoming Undone Pod, and follow me at the Toby J. Brooks. Listen, subscribe, and leave us a review on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Stitcher, or wherever you get your podcasts. Until next time, keep getting better.